Imagine being pulled into a lineup at a police station, not as a suspect for murder, but just to give them some other choices to make when they're trying to identify the murderer. When a witness is taking a look at a line of people in the police station behind a one-way mirror, imagine them picking you, the innocent culprit, all of a sudden now a suspect in a murder case. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. A case of mistaken identity. You know, identity is such an important part of our lives for each of us as individuals. It's the reason why websites like Ancestry.com thrive, because people want to know who they really are, where they come from. Who am I? That's life's greatest question. Who am I? And today I want to explore that topic, and I want to bring you the ultimate answer to that question. You know, I think about the story of Moses when the Pharaoh of Egypt had ordered all the male children that were being born to be killed immediately upon birth. Moses' mother foreseen this to happen, and she bundled them up, made a small little boat, and put them into the river. And one of Pharaoh's daughters gathered him out of the river when he came floating by, and she raised him as her own. She raised him as an Egyptian in the courts of Pharaoh, and he learned all their ways. He learned their politics. He learned their religions, I'm sure. He was trained to be royalty in the courts of Egypt. Except that's not who he truly was it? See, Moses was really an Israelite. And in his heart, when he seen things that were taking place to his fellow Israelites who were in bondage to slavery, who were mistreated, who were beaten, who were abused, it struck a chord within him. And it made him rise up one day and kill one of the Egyptian guards. From that point on, Moses fled into the wilderness. And for 40 years he was in the wilderness, but God was preparing him for the day that he would return to deliver his fellow Israelites out of Egypt, out of bondage. You see, because that's who he really was. That's what he was designed for. He wasn't designed to lay up in the courts of Egypt and to partake of the fruits and the grapes and all the great foods that I'm sure Egyptian royalty bought the privilege to eat. And he wasn't satisfied with that. Now, that would have been a life of comfort, a life of ease, a life of privilege that I'm sure many people would never turn down and never turn their back from. You know, there's a movie back in the 80s with Goldie Hawn. Now, they redid the movie, and it's called Overboard, but the original was when a young rich woman was on a yacht, and she happened to fall overboard. She was knocked unconscious, washed ashore, and an impoverished local guy rescued her. When she came awake, she had amnesia. She didn't have a clue who she was, and except this guy had brought her into his home, kind of nursed her back to health. But in the process, he convinced her that she was really his wife, and that his children and dogs and his rundown cabin in the middle of nowhere was all hers. And while it may have seemed a little strange at first to her, she bought into the lie, and she started living that lie. But, you know, can you imagine yourself being a millionaire, having yachts, having airplanes, having automobiles, having multiple different houses in different places, you know, having all those things at your disposal, but here you are living in the middle of nowhere in a ran down cabin with a leaky roof, with a house full of kids that aren't yours, and a couple of dogs that are tracking mud through the whole house, and you're wearing flannel shirts and holy jeans because that's what you've been led to believe you are. And I believe that's the case that most of us find ourselves in, and it's a case of mistaken identity. We've been lied to. We've been led to believe that we are a certain type of person just because of what we've been through in life. And we allow that to control our lives, to dictate our lives, and ultimately to poison our lives. There's so many instances in the Bible that I can show you where this has happened time and time again, where it tried to happen. And in preparing this message, you know, the examples that I went through were numerous, way too many to lay out before you all in one video. And you know, sometimes we got to let go and let God just take control. You know, we can do all our studies, all our preparations, but when it comes down to the crux, when it comes down to where the rubber meets the road, we got to take our hands off the wheel and just let God drive. But, you know, David, when he was a young shepherd boy and the Israelites were facing the Philistines in battle, David's father sent the young shepherd boy / Grubhub pizza delivery boy down to the battlefield to bring food to his brothers. Now, as he entered into the valley where the two armies were facing off against each other, he couldn't help but overhear Goliath, the giant's taunts and threats, and even his proposition to the Israelites. And he couldn't believe that his fellow Israelites were standing here in fear. And so he asks the question, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that is coming before the armies of the Lord? A young shepherd boy, a Grubhub guy bringing food to his brothers, right? Here he is. What's going on here? What's wrong with this picture? And he's like, what happens if somebody kills this giant? And they tell him, hey, look, if somebody from our army can kill the giant, then the whole Philistine army will surrender. Now, here's this young man who's never tasted battle before, who's never been trained as a soldier before, comes to King Saul himself, at the time the king of Israel, and tells Saul, look, I want to go against this giant. And I'm sure they all got a good laugh out of that, right? But nevertheless, they entertained David, and they laughed at him and said, you know, who do you think that you are that you could go beat them when we have a whole army behind us and none of them are even brave enough to go against this giant? Let's see, his identity was veiled from the king. It was veiled from his brothers. It was veiled from the entire armies of Israel and the Philistine army. You see, because David had an origin story. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I love a good origin story. And one of my favorites probably is Wolverine, you know. Before he gets his claws, you know, before he gets his super fast healing abilities and all, you know, it goes back to the beginning and it shows how he came about those powers. And so I love a good origin story. Well, David's origin story went like this. He was a young shepherd boy that took care of his father's sheep out in the middle of nowhere in the wilderness areas, and his job was to watch over the sheep. Well, at one time, a lion attacked David. A lion attacked the sheep. And he fought off a lion by himself and killed the lion to protect the sheep. On another occasion, a bear came and attacked the sheep. And David once again attacked, defended the sheep, and killed the bear by himself. So unbeknownst to King Saul at the time, here was a lion slayer, a bear killer. This young boy wasn't just a shepherd boy. This young man was not just a pizza delivery boy. His skill had been tried and tested on another battlefield, and he knew that if God could give him the strength to face those enemies and defeat a lion and a bear, then surely the same God could give him the strength to face this giant and to overcome him. And so King Saul said, sure, here you go. Here's my armor. Put on this armor. Put on this sword. And so David tried it on. He tried moving around. It was uncomfortable. It was constraining. It was constrictive. This wasn't his style. And he's like, no. I can't wear this. I can't wear this in the battle. I can't move. You know? And he took it off. Can you imagine the only protection protecting your vital organs that every soldier on the battlefield relies heavily on, that every soldier is trained in, because it's what would protect soldiers from the attacks of the enemy. But David shrugged this armor off, and he went forward, and he faced that giant, and he came against him in the name of God. And he defeated him. You know, but a lot of us are pinned down by our bad decisions, pinned down by our bad choices. And every time we try to rise up against those things and face the battle that sits before us, the devil's there to remind us of every failure we've ever done, every bad choice we've ever made, and he disqualifies us on the spot and prevents us from ever moving forward, from ever even trying on the armor. If I allowed that to happen to me, I wouldn't be sitting here doing a video for you. For many, many years, I chased drugs, I chased alcohol, I chased a lifestyle that brought me the only source of comfort I ever knew. I always felt like an outsider. I always felt like a failure. I always felt like a nobody, a screw up, scum of the earth, a scumbag. I always felt that way. And drugs would take away that pain. Drugs would fill that void in my life. Drugs and alcohol would take over the loneliness, and it'd push it back and envelop me in a warm, fuzzy feeling of euphoria and invincibility. And yes, I lived in that lifestyle for many years. But all along, I was living a case of mistaken identity. And so it's discovering your true identity that empowers you to tackle any of life's problems that comes your way, and to ultimately fulfill God's purpose for your life. Why are you really here? So knowing who you are is the key to unlocking the strength to face adversity, the faith to trust God in the middle of life's toughest storms. And who you are is a child of the living God. Who you are when you become a Christian is a member of a royal priesthood. The Bible tells us that we are a friend of God. In Revelations, we're told that we're kings and priests unto God. And once you grasp who you really are, that the God who spoke billions of stars into existence instantaneously is the same God who knows your name. It's the same God who knows the number of hairs on your head. And it's the same God who went with David into battle to take out that Philistine giant. And that same God is with you today, that will help you overcome every giant in your life. In this time that we're going through, not with COVID-19. I'm not talking about COVID-19. I'm talking about this era, this generation of ungodliness, this generation of lawlessness, this generation of hatred and deception. God needs people to stand in that gap. He needs people to put on that armor. He needs people to discover who they truly are so they can lead His people. And so I just encourage you today that if you've been going through life and you feel like nothing's ever really clicked for you, if you've been going through life and you feel like you've never fit in, I've got good news for you. It's for a reason. You see, because you've been missing it the whole time. It's time for you today to embrace your identity in Christ and to pour yourself into that. And when you start to do that, God will unlock and unleash spiritual gifts, insight, and wisdom into your life that you've never thought possible. And He'll begin to propel you forward on a path that you've never seen yourself going down. And in the process of that, He will use you to touch people's lives and lead them into the same path, into the same knowledge. And in doing so, you will help people unlock their true identity and allow them to escape the lie and live in the truth. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was a blessing to you, and may God bless you.